Thomas had never been to a space station before. It was his first time leaving Earth. And everything felt new. The smell of the air was different. It was cleaner, but carried a faint metallic scent, as if the walls themselves were made from some unknown material. The floors were smooth and reflected light from the glowing panels above. He had come to this station for work. His job was simple: deliver a small package from Earth to a buyer in the station's trading sector. But after a long trip through space, his stomach growled. He decided to find a place to eat before meeting the buyer. Walking down the wide hallway, he saw shops and stalls selling strange objects. Some looked like jewelry made from stones that floated above their stands. Others sold fruits in colors he had never seen on Earth: bright silver, deep violet, and even black with a faint shimmer. Vendors called out in different languages, some soft and melodic, others sharp and fast. Finally, Thomas saw a small cafe at the corner of the corridor. The sign above the entrance had symbols he could not read, but below it, there were smaller words in the trade language: Moonlight, Rest Cafe. The letters were smooth and silver, and the door was open. Inside, the cafe was warm and welcoming. The walls were a soft shade of green, and small lights floated slowly near the ceiling, giving the room a calm, moving glow. There were tables of all shapes, some low to the ground, some tall, and some with no chairs at all, just cushions. Customers of different species sat together, eating, drinking, and talking. Some had fur, others scales, and a few had long, thin fingers that moved like flowing ribbons when they gestured. As Thomas stepped inside, the sound of conversation lowered slightly. It was clear humans were not common here. He gave a small wave and walked to an empty table. The table was smooth and cool to the touch, and when he sat down, the chair adjusted itself to fit his height perfectly. A few moments later, a figure approached. She was the waitress, and she was unlike anyone Thomas had seen before. Her skin was a pale blue, almost like the sky before sunrise. Her large silver eyes reflected the light in the room, and her hair was black and straight, tied neatly at the back. She wore a simple dark uniform with a small silver badge on her chest. She looked young, maybe not much older than Thomas, but it was hard to tell with alien species. "Welcome, traveler," she said in the trade language, her voice soft but clear. "First time here?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, first time on a space station too." Her silver eyes brightened with interest. "Then you must try something special. May I bring you a drink first?" Thomas smiled. "Sure. What do you recommend?" She tilted her head slightly, thinking, "Something mild for a first visit, a moonleaf brew. It is calming and warm." "That sounds good," Thomas replied. She gave a small bow and walked away, her steps silent on the smooth floor. Thomas looked around again. A group of small, round creatures with feather-like hair were laughing loudly in the corner. At another table, a tall alien with 4 arms was slowly reading something on a glowing screen. Everything felt peaceful. When the waitress returned, she carried a silver cup on a small tray. The cup was warm, and the drink inside gave off a faint, pleasant scent, a mix of mint and honey. Thomas took a sip and found it smooth, with a soft sweetness that stayed on his tongue. "This is good," he said. "I'm glad," she replied, her lips curling into a small smile. She stood for a moment longer, looking at him as if deciding whether to ask something. Finally, she spoke again. "I have met humans before, but not often. You seem different from them." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Different? How?" "Most humans I have met are in groups. You are alone," she said simply. Thomas chuckled. "I guess I travel light." The waitress gave a short nod, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Do you want to try something unique from our menu? It is not dangerous for most species." Thomas leaned back in his chair, curious. "What is it?" "It is called the Starfruit Delight," she explained. "It is a dessert, sweet but very rich. Most customers can only eat a small portion." Thomas smiled. "I like a challenge." Her silver eyes widened slightly, but she gave no warning. "Very well, I will bring it." As she walked away, Thomas felt a small wave of excitement. He had no idea what made this dessert special, but the way she spoke about it made him eager to find out. He watched her move behind the counter, speaking to another worker in quick, flowing words he could not understand. The other worker glanced at him, then disappeared into the kitchen while he waited. Thomas noticed that some customers were glancing in his direction. It was not a hostile look, more like curiosity. He guessed they had heard the waitress mention the dessert. Perhaps it was something rare. The waitress returned carrying a round plate covered with a clear lid. She placed it gently in front of him, then lifted the lid with a soft hiss of escaping steam. The dessert was unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. It was a small, round cake, but its surface glowed faintly like starlight reflected on water. It smelled sweet, but also had a sharp, fruity scent. The glow was not bright, just enough to catch the eye. "Starfruit delight," she said, almost like an announcement. "Enjoy." Thomas picked up the small fork beside the plate and cut a piece. The texture was soft, almost creamy, but it held together well. He put the bite in his mouth and felt a rush of flavor, sweet, sharp, and cool all at once. It was richer than anything he had tasted, yet it made him want another bite immediately. The waitress did not walk away. She stayed nearby, watching him with quiet interest. Other customers had also turned their heads toward his table. Thomas smiled, swallowing the first bite. "This is really good. Most people say that before they stop," she replied softly. Thomas laughed, then took another bite, and another. He could not explain why, but the dessert seemed easier to eat the more he had. He was already halfway through the plate before he realized the waitress's silver eyes had widened just a little more. He set down his fork and looked at her. "What? Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but perhaps you are not like the others after all." Thomas raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Returning to his dessert, he had no idea that this simple moment in a quiet cafe would be the start of something the whole station would talk about. The dessert plate was almost empty when Thomas looked up. The pale blue waitress still stood nearby, watching closely. Her silver eyes had the same curious shine as before, but now there was something else in them. Surprise. "You finished it so quickly," she said softly, almost to herself. Thomas smiled. "It was good." "Why wouldn't I finish it?" She hesitated before answering. "Most customers cannot eat more than a few bites. They say it feels too heavy, too strong. But you ate it like it was nothing." Thomas shrugged. "Maybe I just have a big appetite." The waitress tilted her head, thinking. Then she leaned a little closer and lowered her voice. "Would you like to try the real challenge, Thomas?" Put down his fork. "Real challenge? Yes," she said, nodding slightly. "We have something here called the station special. It is not on the menu. It is a large starfruit delight, almost 3 times the size of the one you just ate. If someone finishes it without stopping, they get free meals here for an entire year." Thomas's eyes widened. "A year? That's a good deal." She smiled. "Faintly, it is, but no one has ever done it, not in the 3 years I have worked here." Thomas looked around. He noticed a few customers were now openly watching him, as if they already knew what the waitress was suggesting. Some had faint smiles, others were whispering to each other. He leaned back in his chair. "All right, bring it." The waitress blinked. "Are you sure?" "Of course," Thomas said with confidence. "How bad could it be?" The pale blue waitress gave a slow nod and walked toward the kitchen. The moment she disappeared behind the swinging door, the quiet murmurs in the cafe grew louder. A small group of customers at a nearby table leaned closer to Thomas. "You're going to try it?" one of them asked in the trade language. The speaker was a short alien with dark, smooth skin and large round eyes. "Yeah," Thomas said. "Why not?" The alien tilted his head. "It is harder than you think. My cousin tried once. He could not move for the rest of the day." Thomas laughed lightly. "Sounds like a normal holiday dinner back on Earth." The alien looked confused but didn't ask further. A few minutes later, the kitchen door swung open. The waitress returned, but she was not alone. Another worker, taller, with skin like polished copper, followed her, carrying a wide silver tray with both hands. On the tray sat a massive starfruit delight. It was the size of a dinner plate, and the faint glow on its surface was brighter than before. Steam curled upward from it, carrying the same sweet sharp scent that Thomas had noticed earlier. The waitress placed the tray in front of him, then stepped back. The other worker stayed nearby, folding his arms as if this was some kind of official event. "The rules are simple," the waitress said. "You must finish it without leaving the table. No breaks. No stopping. If you do, the challenge ends." Thomas nodded. "Sounds fair." The waitress took a step to the side, giving the other customers a clear view. Now the cafe was almost silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Even the small floating lights above seemed to drift slower, as if they too were watching. Thomas picked up his fork. "All right, let's see what all the fuss is about." The first bite was as rich and smooth as before, but this time the flavor felt deeper. It filled his mouth completely, leaving a cool aftertaste. The second bite came quickly after, and then a third dot around him. The customers began to whisper again. "He's not slowing down. Maybe humans eat faster. No, look, he's enjoying it." Thomas didn't listen to them. He kept eating at a steady pace. Every bite made him want another. The richness that had stopped others didn't bother him at all. It was sweet, but not too sweet. Heavy, but in a way that felt satisfying rather than tiring. After what felt like only a few minutes, half the dessert was gone. The waitress's silver eyes had grown wide. She exchanged a glance with the copper-skinned worker, who raised his eyebrows. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked. Thomas grinned. "Better than all right." He kept going. Bite after bite disappeared from the plate. His pace slowed slightly near the end, but only because he wanted to enjoy it. The room had grown completely quiet now. Every eye was on him. Finally, with a small smile, Thomas placed his fork down on the empty plate. "There," he said. "All done." For a moment, there was no sound at all. Then a wave of surprised murmurs filled the cafe. Some customers clapped lightly, others shook their heads in disbelief. The waitress stepped forward slowly. "You actually did it," Thomas chuckled. "Told you I had a big appetite." She stared at him for another second, then seemed to remember something. "You have earned free meals here for a year. I will arrange it right away." As she turned to walk away, Thomas noticed her hand trembling slightly. She whispered something to the copper-skinned worker, who gave a quiet laugh and shook his head. Thomas leaned back in his chair, feeling proud but also amused. It was just a dessert, yet everyone here acted like he had done something impossible. He didn't know it yet, but his simple choice to accept the challenge would soon make him the center of attention. Far beyond this little cafe, Thomas was still sitting at the table, the empty plate in front of him. When he realized the cafe had not gone back to normal, everyone was still looking his way. Some customers leaned forward as if expecting him to suddenly collapse. Others whispered in low voices, eyes wide. The pale blue waitress returned, holding a small card with silver edges. She placed it gently on the table. "This is your free meal card," she said. "It will work for the next 12 months. Show it at the counter, and you will be served without payment." Thomas picked it up and turned it in his hands. The surface shimmered softly, like moonlight on water. "Thanks. This is pretty generous for just eating dessert." The waitress didn't answer right away. She was still watching him closely, her silver eyes unblinking. "What?" Thomas asked, raising an eyebrow. "You should not be able to do that," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Eat," Thomas laughed. "I've been doing that my whole life." She shook her head. "You do not understand. The starfruit delight is made from a fruit that drains energy from most species. Even those who love the taste can only eat a small amount before feeling tired. Some even fall asleep at the table. But you look fine." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Maybe humans are built differently. Perhaps," she said, though her tone suggested she was not fully convinced. At the far corner of the cafe, a group of customers had gathered around a table, talking quickly in the trade language. Thomas caught a few words, but not enough to make sense of it. He noticed that a tall, thin alien with bright yellow skin kept glancing at him, as if studying him like a rare object. The waitress noticed too. She sighed softly. I think you have. Attracted attention. Thomas grinned. I guess I'm a local celebrity now. She didn't smile back. Instead, she stepped closer and spoke in a lower voice. This is not the kind of attention you want. Some will be curious, others may see you as an opportunity. Thomas frowned. Opportunity for what? Before she could answer, the kitchen door swung open and another worker stepped out. This one was older, with gray markings on his dark skin and a steady, serious expression. He walked straight to the waitress and spoke quickly in a language Thomas didn't know. The waitress nodded slowly, then turned back to Thomas. My manager wants to speak with you after you finish your drink. Thomas glanced at his cup of moonleaf brew, which was now half empty. All right. Is this about the dessert? Yes, she said simply. The older worker waited near the counter, arms folded. The rest of the cafe had gone quieter again, the way it had when Thomas first walked in. He could feel the weight of many eyes on him when he finished his drink. The waitress led him to a small door near the back of the cafe. Inside was a narrow office with shelves full of strange containers and a desk made from some smooth, dark material. The older worker, the manager, sat behind the desk. You are human, the manager said, speaking in the trade language with a deep, slow voice. Yes, Thomas replied. The manager studied him for a long moment. And you ate the full station special without stopping? That's right, Thomas said. It was good. The manager leaned back slightly. You may not realize what this means. That fruit you just ate is rare. It grows only on one moon. In this sector, it is valued because it gives strong energy to a few species, but to most, it brings exhaustion. You are not the first human to try it, but you are the first to finish so much without side effects. Thomas raised an eyebrow. So humans can eat it safely. Not all, perhaps, the manager said. But you can. And now, others will want to know why. Thomas crossed his arms. Others like who? The manager did not answer directly. Some will be merchants. They will want you to eat more, to prove humans can handle the fruit. They will see profit. Others may be researchers who will want to study you. And some may not ask before they take what they want. Thomas felt a small chill at the way he said it. That's a lot of trouble over dessert. It is not just dessert, the manager replied. It is a resource. And you just showed the whole room that you can do what no one else can. The pale blue waitress, who had been standing quietly at the side, finally spoke. I told you it would attract attention. Thomas gave a small smile. Guess I should have eaten slower. The manager didn't smile. Be careful, human. Word travels fast on this station. You should leave soon if you do not want to be noticed further. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll keep that in mind. When they stepped out of the office, the cafe felt different. The customers were still there, but their conversations had changed. He could hear his own description being passed around. The human who ate the starfruit delight. The one who didn't stop. The waitress walked him to the door. If you come back, I will serve you, but I cannot promise you will be left alone. Thomas thanked her and stepped out into the station's main quarter. The air outside felt cooler. The noise of the crowd louder than before. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the waitress was right. This was not just about food anymore. He glanced at the free meal card in his hand, its silver edges catching the light. It was supposed to be a simple reward, but it felt heavier now, not in weight, but in meaning. Thomas walked away from the cafe, unaware that several pairs of eyes were already following him from a distance. Thomas returned to the Moonlight Rest Cafe the next day. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the free meal card, or maybe it was the way the pale blue waitress had looked at him yesterday. Curious but cautious, when he walked in, the cafe was less crowded than before. A few customers sat in corners, sipping drinks, but most of the tables were empty. The floating lights above drifted slowly, casting soft patterns across the walls. The same waitress noticed him immediately. She was behind the counter, arranging cups. Her silver eyes lifted to meet his, and for a brief moment, she seemed surprised he had come back so soon. She walked over to his table. You return, she said. Thomas smiled. I wanted another drink, and maybe to ask a few questions. She tilted her head. Questions about the starfruit delight? Exactly, Thomas said. Yesterday, everyone acted like I had done something impossible. I want to understand why. She hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen, then back at him. If I explain, you must promise to listen carefully. This is not just about food. Thomas nodded. All right, I'm listening. The waitress sat down across from him, folding her hands on the table. The fruit used in that dessert is called varela. It grows only on the moon of a small gas giant called Tivessa. The plant is difficult to cultivate, and each fruit takes 2 years to ripen. It is considered valuable in trade, but it is dangerous for most who eat it in large amounts. Thomas leaned forward. Dangerous how? For most species, she continued, the fruit's natural compounds bind to their body's energy channels. It causes sudden fatigue, muscle weakness, and sometimes unconsciousness. A few species can eat more before they feel the effect, but none can eat as much as you did without slowing down. Thomas frowned. But for humans, it's fine. She nodded slowly. It seems so. Your body does not react to the compounds in the same way. Instead of draining your energy, the fruit's nutrients simply feed into your system like any other food. Thomas sat back in his chair. So, humans could eat this stuff all day. Perhaps, she said. But that is not the main issue. The varela fruit is rare, and its effects are valued for both good and bad reasons. Some traders see it as a luxury food. Some warriors use it before resting, to force deep sleep. And some use it in ways I will not speak of. If it becomes known that humans can eat large amounts, there will be those who want humans as workers, test subjects, or even bargaining tools. Thomas gave a small half smile. You make it sound like I'm in danger because I ate dessert. You are, she said plainly. Yesterday, at least for customers sent messages after you left. The story is already moving through the stations. Markets, Thomas rubbed his chin. And you're telling me this because... She hesitated again, then spoke in a softer voice. Because I think there is more to it than just your species. I want to see if what happened yesterday was only luck or something greater. He raised an eyebrow. How do you plan to test that? Her silver eyes focused on him with a calm determination. I will bring you to portions of the dessert, fresh, large, and served at the same time. If you finish both without showing signs of fatigue, I will know for sure. Thomas grinned. 2. You're making this too easy. She did not smile. I am serious, and I will watch you closely. She stood and walked to the kitchen, disappearing through the door. Thomas leaned back, feeling oddly excited. If yesterday had caused such a stir, then today would certainly add more fuel to the story. A few minutes later, she returned, carrying a large tray. On it were 2 plates, each holding a glowing starfruit delight. Steam rose gently from both. Carrying that same sweet sharp scent that filled the air, she placed them on the table, one in front of the other. The challenge begins now, she said. No breaks. Thomas picked up his fork and began eating. The taste was as perfect as before. Smooth, creamy, and rich. He moved quickly but steadily, finishing the first plate without much thought. The waitress's gaze stayed fixed on him the entire time, her hands folded in front of her. When he set down the empty first plate, she spoke quietly. And now the second. Thomas didn't waste time. He started on the second dessert, and by the halfway point, he noticed her silver eyes growing wider. She looked like she was holding her breath. 10 minutes later, the second plate was clean. Thomas set down his fork, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Well, he asked, for a moment. She just stared at him, her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. Then, without warning, she swayed on her feet and caught the edge of the table. Are you? Thomas began. But before he could finish, she fainted. He jumped to his feet, circling the table to catch her before she fell to the ground. She was light in his arms, her blue skin cool to the touch. Several customers who had been quietly watching from their seats rushed over. One of them, a short alien with smooth green skin, spoke quickly. She is all right, just shocked. I will help. Thomas carefully placed her into the green-skinned alien's arms. Why would she faint? The alien glanced at the empty plates, then back at him. Because no one can do what you just did. Not here, not anywhere. As they carried her to the back room, Thomas stood still for a moment. The cafe had gone. Silent again, just like yesterday. All eyes were on him. It was then that he realized the waitress's warning had not been an exaggeration. This was no longer about free meals or even the challenge. Whatever made him different had just been proven beyond doubt, and now more people than ever knew it. The moment the pale blue waitress fainted, the quiet cafe turned into a small storm of movement. Chairs scraped the floor as customers stood up. A few rushed forward to help, while others stayed back, whispering and pointing toward the two empty dessert plates on the table. Thomas had already caught her before she hit the floor. She was light in his arms, her blue skin cool, and her head tilted slightly against his shoulder. He looked down at her still face, then back at the other customers. She just fainted, he said. Is she going to be okay? The green-skinned customer who had spoken earlier stepped forward again. She will be fine. This is not illness. This is shock. She believed no one could eat that much varela fruit. Now she has seen you do it. Thomas nodded and carefully handed her over. Two other workers came from the kitchen, one carrying a folded blanket. They laid her gently on a long cushioned seat. At the far side of the cafe, the copper-skinned worker, who Thomas had seen yesterday, turned to him. Please sit. We will take care of her. Thomas sat back at his table, feeling awkward. He was used to people being surprised when he did something unusual, but never to the point where someone fainted. The two plates sat in front of him, perfectly clean except for a faint trace of the glowing syrup. Customers kept glancing his way, some in disbelief, others with a sort of wary respect. The short alien with round eyes from yesterday's challenge came closer. Do you feel tired? The alien asked. No, Thomas said. Not at all. Why? If I ate half of one plate, I would sleep for hours, the alien said, shaking his head. To full plates, you would not see me until tomorrow. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Guess humans are different. The alien gave a small laugh, but it was not just amusement. There was something like nervousness in the sound. Different, yes, that will make you interesting here. Maybe too interesting. Meanwhile, at the other side of the cafe, the pale blue waitress slowly opened her eyes. She looked around, confused for a moment, then sat up with the help of her co-workers. Thomas walked over to her. Are you okay? She blinked, her silver eyes focusing on him. Yes, I am fine. Just surprised. That's one word for it, Thomas said with a half smile. She looked toward the empty plates, then back at him. I thought perhaps yesterday was a rare case, that you were just lucky, or the dessert was weaker than usual. But today leaves no doubt. No doubt about what? He asked. That you are not just able to eat varela fruit, she said slowly, but that you can eat it without limit, at least more than I have ever seen anyone do. Thomas shrugged. It's just food. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. It is not just food here. You have shown something that will travel far as a story. Some will think it is funny. Some will think it is a sign of strength. And some will see it as a way to use you. Thomas sighed. You said something like that yesterday. But do you really think eating dessert makes me a target? She nodded firmly. Yes. On a station like this, anything rare is valuable. Rare abilities even more so. You have one now, whether you want it or not. The copper-skinned worker approached, holding a small glass of pale green liquid. He handed it to her, and she drank slowly before continuing. I fainted because I realized something, she said, her voice calmer now. If humans can eat large amounts of varela fruit, then humans could work longer hours in places where the fruit is used as food. Traders might pay to bring humans here, or worse, they might take them. Thomas crossed his arms. That's a bit extreme. Not for some people, she replied. This station is peaceful on the surface, but there are always those looking for advantage. You have just handed them one. A few of the nearby customers were listening closely, their eyes flicking between the two of them. Thomas noticed it and lowered his voice. So what do you suggest I do? Leave? The waitress looked at him for a long moment. If you stay, keep to quiet places, avoid public challenges, and do not speak too much about what you can do. The more people know, the less control you have. Thomas gave a slow nod. All right, I'll be careful. But even as he said it, he knew that word of this had already spread. Yesterday, the cafe had been half full during his challenge. Today, even with fewer customers, he had seen more than enough curious eyes watching. And tomorrow, there would probably be more. The green-skinned customer who had taken charge earlier returned, speaking quietly to the waitress. She listened, then turned to Thomas. He says there are already people in the market sector talking about you. By tomorrow morning, they will be in the docking bays as well. Thomas gave a half smile. Guess I'm famous. She didn't smile back. Fame is not always a gift. The rest of the afternoon passed with fewer words between them. Thomas stayed for a moonleaf brew and then decided to leave before more people arrived. As he walked out, he felt the weight of several stares following him to the door. The quarter outside was busy with traders, shoppers, and travelers. But here and there, he noticed something he hadn't before, a few faces turning to watch him as he passed. Maybe they were just curious, or maybe they already knew the story. He put the free meal card back into his jacket pocket and kept walking, pretending not to notice. But deep down, he knew the waitress was right. Keeping this quiet was already going to be impossible. By the next morning, Thomas realized the waitress had been right. The story had already moved beyond the cafe. When he walked through the market sector of the station, people seemed to notice him. It wasn't everyone, but enough to make it obvious. Some would look at him, then whisper to the person beside them. Others would stare openly, their expressions filled with curiosity. Thomas tried to ignore it. He had work to do, deliver the small package he had brought from Earth. But even on the way to the buyer's shop, he passed by two vendors talking about the human who ate the double star fruit delight. One vendor noticed him, pointed, and whispered something to the other, who immediately turned to watch him go by. The buyer accepted the package without comment, but Thomas could tell he was being looked at more than usual. After finishing the delivery, he decided to head back toward the quieter parts of the station. Crowds were beginning to make him uneasy. As he walked, a voice called out from behind, "Human." Wait a moment. Thomas turned to see a tall alien with light green skin and bright gold eyes. The alien wore a dark vest with several silver chains hanging from it. He had the confident air of someone used to making deals. "You are the one from the cafe," the alien said. "The one who finished the full portions of varroa fruit." Thomas sighed. "That's me." The alien's gold eyes gleamed. "I represent a trade group. We would be willing to pay you to appear at certain gatherings, to eat in front of people. It would be a show, and we would profit, and so would you." Thomas shook his head. "I'm not interested in being a show." The alien looked surprised. "You could make a great deal of money, more than you might earn from whatever it is you do now." "Still not interested," Thomas said firmly. The alien studied him for a moment, then gave a slow smile. "You may change your mind. I will find you again." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Thomas kept moving. He didn't like how quickly things were happening. Later that day, he returned to the Moonlight Rest Cafe. The pale blue waitress was behind the counter again. When she saw him, she gave a faint smile, but also a look that suggested she had news. "You have been noticed," she said as soon as he sat down. "I can tell," Thomas replied. "Some guy in the market tried to hire me to eat in front of people." Her silver eyes darkened slightly. "That is only the beginning. I have heard from other customers that merchants are already discussing whether humans could be brought here for work involving varroa fruit. They are imagining ways to use your ability." Thomas frowned. "They don't even know if other humans can do it. They will not care until they test it," she said. "And they may try to do so without asking." Thomas looked around. The cafe was busier than before. Some customers were here for the food, but others were clearly here for him. He could feel their eyes watching. "I might need to leave the station soon," Thomas said quietly. The waitress nodded. "It would be wise. But if you go, go quickly, and do not tell people where you are headed." They spoke little after that. Thomas ordered a simple meal, no dessert this time, and left before the crowd grew larger. In the days that followed, the rumor only grew. In the docking bays, travelers spoke of the human with the endless stomach. In the trade halls, deals were already being discussed based on the idea that humans could work in environments rich with vanilla fruit without needing long breaks. One evening, Thomas walked through a quieter corridor to avoid the main traffic. Halfway down, a small figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a short alien in a long brown coat. "You should be careful, human," the figure said in a low voice. Thomas stopped. "Who are you?" "Someone who has seen this before," the figure replied. "Years ago, a different species was found to have a rare ability. The merchants swarmed, the markets shifted, and soon that species was scattered across the sector. Not by choice. If you are wise, you will leave before the same happens to yours." Thomas studied the figure's hidden face, but the hood made it impossible to see clearly. "Why warn me?" "Because I dislike seeing the same story repeat," the figure said, "and because your kind may need to know what is coming." Before Thomas could ask more, the figure stepped back into the shadows and was gone. He stood there for a moment, thinking. The waitress had warned him. Now a stranger had warned him too. It was clear the situation was more dangerous than he had believed at first. The next morning, Thomas began making quiet preparations to leave the station. He booked passage on a small cargo ship headed toward a neutral trade hub. The departure was in today's. When he told the waitress, she seemed relieved. "It is the right choice," she said. "You will be safer away from here. But be careful. Rumors travel faster than ships." Thomas gave a small nod. "I'll keep my head down." But even as he said it, he knew it might not be enough. The story of the human who could eat what no one else could was already out in the galaxy. And some stories had a way of finding their subject no matter how far they ran. 2 days later, the docking bay smelled faintly of engine fuel and metal dust. Thomas stood beside the boarding ramp of the small cargo ship called Silver Path. It wasn't much to look at, dull gray hull, a few patches from old repairs, and a slow hum from its idle engines. But it would take him far from the station, and that was enough. He had only one bag. Most of his belongings had been sold or left behind to keep his travel light. A heavy coat was draped over his shoulder, partly to hide his face from anyone watching. The Moonlight Rest Cafe had been his last stop that morning. The pale blue waitress had met him with a calm expression, but he could tell her eyes carried a quiet sadness. "You will not return soon, will you?" she had asked. Thomas shook his head. "It's better if I disappear for a while." She nodded slowly. "Then listen. Do not think that leaving the station will end the story. People will remember. They will wonder where you went, and some will try to follow." Thomas had promised he would stay careful. She had slid a small sealed packet across the counter to him. "For the road," she said. "Do not open it until you are far away. Now, standing at the dock." Thomas glanced at the packet in his pocket. He didn't know what was inside, but he trusted her enough to keep it close. A mechanical voice announced that boarding was open. Passengers began walking up the ramp, traders, a few engineers. Into families with small children, Thomas joined the line, keeping his head low. Halfway up the ramp, a voice called from below. "Thomas." He turned. Slowly. It was the tall green-skinned merchant from the market, the one who had tried to hire him to eat in public. The merchant was moving quickly toward the ramp, his gold eyes fixed on Thomas. "You should reconsider my offer," the merchant said, loudly, drawing the attention of others nearby. "There's profit to be made, fame to be had." "Why run?" Thomas met his gaze without answering. Then he stepped forward, giving his ticket to the ship's attendant. The merchant's voice rose. "You will not be able to hide forever, human." Thomas didn't look back. The attendant closed the ramp behind him, and the sound of the docking bay grew quieter. Inside, the Silver Path smelled faintly of old cargo crates and recycled air. The passenger seats were simple, gray cushions bolted to the walls, safety. Straps hanging loose. Thomas found a seat near the back, away from the windows. As the ship lifted off, the station began to shrink in the small viewing glass. He thought of the cafe, the warm light, and the quiet voice of the waitress warning him again and again. Hours passed in steady travel. Most passengers kept to themselves. Thomas opened the small packet she had given him. Inside was a folded piece of cloth and a tiny metal disc. The cloth was deep blue, soft, and stitched with a simple star pattern. The disc was a translator chip, far more advanced than the one he carried now. There was a short note, written in careful block letters, for when words must be understood quickly. Keep your name hidden until you must reveal it. Trust few, Thomas. Closed the packet and put it back in his coat. The gift was more than useful. It was a sign she truly believed he might face danger soon. The Silver Path made a stop at a small fuel station orbiting a quiet moon. Thomas stayed on board, not wanting to risk being seen. But while other passengers disembarked for a short break, he overheard the cargo handlers speaking in the loading bay. They say there's a human on board, one of them whispered. The one from the Varela story? The other asked. Could be. The first replied. If it's true, someone will be waiting for him at the next hub. There's money in that rumor. Thomas sat still, his mind weighing the words. It had only been 2 days, and already the rumor had traveled faster than his ship. When the ship left the fuel station, he decided he couldn't travel directly to the hub he had booked. At the next transfer point, he would change his plan, find a ship going somewhere no one expected. That night, as the Silver Path drifted through the silent dark, Thomas looked out the small viewing glass. Stars stretched in every direction, endless and cold. Somewhere out there were people already imagining ways to use this strange ability. Somewhere out there was a trail of whispers, with his name on it, but in that same endless space, there was also freedom, planets he had never seen, places where no one cared about Varela fruit or human eating limits. When the ship's engine shifted for the final jump to the trade hub, Thomas made his choice. He would not step onto the hub's docks. He would vanish again, change ships quietly, and head toward the less traveled systems. The waitress's words echoed in his mind. Rumors travel faster than ships. As the stars blurred into lines and the jump began. Thomas leaned back in his seat. The galaxy might come looking for him, but for now, it would have to look in the wrong places. Somewhere, far from the trade routes, he would find a quiet corner of space to call his own. And maybe, one day, when the time was right, the galaxy would hear his side of the story, not just the rumor of the human who could do the impossible. For now, though, Thomas smiled faintly to himself and disappeared into the dark between the stars.